Hi, I'm Clark Smith. I'm the winemaker for WineSmith, and today it is my very great pleasure to introduce you to the first ever WineSmith Tannat. Now, I've been making Tannat ever since the 90s in France, where under the tutelage of Patrick Ducournau, he is the guy who invented micro-oxygenation and taught me how to do it, and it was because of the Tannat was the native grape in Madiran, which is a little 24 winery appellation in France, south of Bordeaux and inside of the Pyrenees, and they grow Tannat there traditionally. Now Tannat is a beast. It's got about 3 times as much tannin as Cabernet Sauvignon. And so what happened is, after World War II, this idea that oxygen is the enemy of wine became fashionable in Germany and then later on in France. And so they were keeping the oxygen away from the wines, and that's a really good idea for fresh white wine. It's a terrible idea for reds, and it's taken us 50 years to figure out that really those wines crave oxygen, and especially Tannat. So the Tannat that they were making in the 70s and 80s was just terrible. It was very dry. It was like drinking cocoa powder, and it didn't integrate its aromas very well. We get bready. It was just awful. So a lot of his neighbors were pulling it out, and he's going, well, what are you doing? This is our tradition. We have to learn how to make this. And he had a dream sometime around 1990, early, I think it was like 89, that the wine was starved for oxygen. And so he went to see a guy named Michel Moutonnet, who's the top phenolics chemist at the time in France, still is in my opinion. Great guy, and he said, well, here's a ceramic reverse osmosis membrane. I'm going to cut you off about 1.5 inches of it. He probably said 10 centimeters. Why don't you use this to bubble oxygen into the wine? So he did. Just about 3 or 4 times what a barrel could give it, and the wine was wonderful. It improved substantially and held on to its color, and it was just great. So by the time I got there, he was giving it 180 barrel equivalents. That's, again, about 3 times as much as you can give a Cabernet Sauvignon. And the wines were just rich and dense, but very tannic, and they take a long time to age. So then he taught the people in Uruguay how to make Tannat, and there are several Tannats around the United States, particularly in Texas. But I managed to get my hands on one of the very few Tannat vineyards in California. This is the Herringer estate. And so what I did, if you've read my book, Postmodern Winemaking, the first few chapters are all about what I learned from Patrick in France about micro-oxygenation and structure and uses of lees and oak chips and all kinds of... He kind of has a cooking school out there called Inodev. They've recently changed their name to Vivalis, but you don't care about that. All right, so anyway, I finally managed to get my hands on one of the few plantings of Tannat in California. And it's in Clarksburg. It's the same place we get our Norton. It's the Herringer family estate. And this is what I got. Now, this is a 2019. That doesn't make any sense. The Tannat always takes 3 or 4 years, and here we are just in the spring of 2021, and I'm releasing a 19 Tannat. Well, but this is not your average Tannat. I don't understand why, but there's something about the terroir there on Steve and Mike Herringer's farm down in the Sacramento Delta that just makes for an extremely feminine, drinkable Tannat, which also will age for several decades. So, first of all, you want to make sure you don't get this stuff on your clothes. It's very dark, but it's not harsh. It's so wonderfully drinkable. So to begin with, you have this rich sort of plum and blueberry nose, This just, you know, so perfumey. And then there's plenty of tannin, but it's so silky. It's like drinking blueberry pie. Got some nice complexity in the finish and everything, but it just isn't a masculine, harsh Tannat like every other Tannat I've ever worked with. This one is just round and feminine and one of the most delicious wines I've ever made. Salut!